Welcome back to the Infinite Restaurants podcast, where we share insights, perspectives, and stories from the front lines of hospitality. I'm your host, Andrew Cook. Infinite Restaurants is brought to you by Harbor Foodservice, a fourth-generation family-owned company whose purpose is to nourish the spirit of their Harbor Foods Group family, the industry, and the communities that we all serve. Speaking of whom, today we're going to be talking with Randy Irvine, president of Harbor Foodservice, and we're going to be exploring topics of leadership through changing times, adaptations that the industry is making on many levels, including the distribution level, and experiences that we've had traveling the state and meeting with operators and seeing the innovations at play. So I guess rather than talking about it, let's get down to the business of talking about it. And here we are with Randy Irvine, president of Harbor Foodservice. Listeners, you may be catching some odd sounds. That's because we are in Randy's office, which sits directly above a huge warehouse, which is in full production, getting you, the restaurateur, what you need. So without any more preamble, hi, Randy. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Andy. Good to see you. Thanks for having me here.
You too. I haven't seen you in person for quite some time. You still look the same. Your hair's a little longer.
Yeah, you know, that does happen over time.
Yeah.
I did find my razor though, so at least I made sure that the hair on the face was trimmed nice and tight. So
We are recording this in July of pandemic. I don't even know if we need to call it 2020 anymore. I think we can call it 20 pandemic. And we are in very interesting times, aren't we?
I think that's an understatement. I don't think any of us have ever been in this kind of situation before, and it certainly is leading to some challenging decisions that have to be made. But I also look at it, instead of being a very difficult time, it's an opportunistic time. Mm-hmm. So I think being real about what's happening out in front of us and being optimistic about what could be is a good mix. So That's the way I'm looking at it.
Restaurants are very much a performance. It's an orchestration of so many things that come together at that point of contact with our guests. And a lot of that is what's going on that plate or the plate itself. I mean, there's so many things that you have to get from outside. You don't just self-generate like you do service or the experience. Let's talk a little bit about that in this day and age. You once told me that based on data and predictive analytics, that you're often trying to get what you think people are going to need 6 weeks before you get it for what they're going to need 6 weeks in the future. And I don't know if I've got the numbers right, but when something as sudden as this happens, what does that mean to the supply chain?
Yeah, that's a really good starting point, I think. As a food service distributor to food service establishments, more than just restaurants, this has probably been the most damaging action that could have ever taken place to disrupt a supply chain. And I think in the food service industry is, we like to say that it's a daily decision that usually takes place with the restaurant. And then the supply chain behind that has to daily respond to that. And so we're used to being able to be agile and change direction pretty quickly. But this entire crisis did more than just change direction. It just halted. And when that happens, the supply chain just doesn't know what to do with that. Mm-hmm. So I think, early on in March and April, we are all in the same boat, and we all recognize that there's going to be a massive disruption that's coming. I remember the feeling back in March of the shock and how are we going to manage through this? And the first thing I thought of was let's take care of our people first. Mm-hmm. And then let's worry about the products and the supply second. And so we went through that very systematically and a very high pressure, high stress crisis mode. And I think one of the things, Andy, that I kept going back to in the overall conversations that you and I have had about this is I kept going back to how are we going to help the industry not just survive this, but come out the other end better than what it was. And I don't know that answer has come up yet completely, but it always has come down to how do we treat each other? How do we treat our own employees? How do we treat our customers? And then out of all the interaction that we have in our communities, how are we really going to help make this industry that is all about social interaction, how are we going to make that better than what it was before, and just in a different way? And so I do recall having this sense of a little bit of trepidation of, are we going to get through this in a couple of months, or is this going to last a year or more. And I think we all didn't want to admit that it's going to last a long time. But now that we're in this several months, it's more of a recognition that this is an opportunity for us to alter the way that we serve. And I think that starts, from the public, and then it goes through the restaurants, and which are our customers, and then it comes into our organization as well. And then we get to turn around and talk with all of our manufacturers and growers and ranchers, and talk with them about what that's going to look like in the future. And it's really given us an opportunity to create a community that's different than what we thought we were in before.
I want to talk about something that is related to COVID, but it's not really about COVID. COVID is just sort of the backdrop, this extreme backdrop of context that helps to illustrate this point. But you had shared a story with me about an experience you had in a recent road trip to Eastern Washington at a restaurant that had made a plan and that had displayed such a level of intentionality and leadership and communication and projection of ideals and priorities. I'm hoping that we can talk about this for the audience in a way that will help illustrate a larger conversation about leadership in a crisis. And I'm going to turn the story over to you now, Randy. Go for it.
Yeah, I think, there's a process that we all go through. And when you're under stress and you're under decision making, there's got to be a fallback. And I think one of the things that taking a little time off last week was this idea that my wife and I came up with of, hey, let's do what everybody else is doing. Let's get in the car and let's drive around and be very specific about our social distancing and find locations that we can be apart from others, but also, kind of get away from the daily routine that we're in. So we jumped in the car and drove up over the North Cascades Highway and over into Eastern Washington and northern Idaho, and we stayed at 3 different locations in those communities for about 3 days each, and mostly with the intent of I just need a break, like everybody probably does, and get out of the routine of the daily life that we're trying to figure out how to navigate right now.
Right.
And I think what I got out of it, Andy, that you're referencing is the interaction at the locations that I chose to either stop at and spend money with, or just sit down and relax and dine, and anywhere from taking a hike and going to a park and being alone. I think overall, I'm very proud to say that most people the majority of people were very good about social distancing, very good, like my wife and I, are about wearing our masks every day. And there seemed to be, from our standpoint, whenever we had that intention to do the right thing and to honor others by wearing our mask, we felt that was our thing. And it really reflected back in, I saw very, very similar activities, which was very enlightening. But there's one specific story that I want to try to quickly get through, and it was an interaction with an owner of one of the restaurants that we ate at in Leavenworth, Washington.
Right now, because this is such a positive story, let's call them out.
Yeah, I would hope that they would be okay with it.
Yeah.
We don't do business with them directly as Harbor Foodservice and serving them. But they're in the business, and I'm all about how do we help this industry not just survive, but how do we help it thrive? And so I want to talk about the positive experiences and hope that it will be inspiration for others, inspiration for our own employees, to really help others recognize that how that intention that I witnessed and participated in really helped me feel good about this location and the owner's ideals on how they're going to run their business. And
Do you want to tell us the name of the restaurant?
it's called Yodelin.
Yodelin. Okay.
Yodelin,
Like
which,
yodeling.
if you've been to Leavenworth, it's a Bavarian city, and so hey, if you're going to yodel, why not go yodeling somewhere?
Hey, this is radio. Can you yodel?
No way.
You want to give it a shot? I'll give it a shot if you give it a shot.
Not even going to try.
All right.
I would say the Leavenworth was looking good, and people were taking care of things and wearing masks, and they were following the rules. No different at Yodelin. And so as I was waiting for my chance to eat and to be sat on a picnic table outdoors, I got a chance to talk with the gentleman at the front. I did not catch his name, but took ownership in the communication and sharing of why it was going to take time for us to wait to be seated, even though the place wasn't very busy. He was very intentional on wearing a mask and about having a plexiglass around his host area. I assumed he was the owner. I should have introduced myself and asked his name as well for this benefit. But for that sake, I would just have to say that he was representing what the owners were talking about and what was important to them. And so I asked him, this must be very difficult for you to turn away patrons that want to come and eat at your establishment. He said, actually, no, I am not disappointed in that. I'm very pleased that we're doing what we're doing because the alternative is no rules and everybody walking around without a mask on and putting themselves in potentially harm's way of spreading this virus. And his motivation was, I want to get through this. I want to help be a part of the solution, not the problem. And frankly, I've got children at school that are not at school, they're at home, and I want them to go back to school. So I really want to do my part as a business owner to really encourage others to stay safe while I'm opening up my business and encouraging people to come eat at my establishment. I thought, that's pretty cool. Okay, he's got motivation. He wants to get the kids out of the house and wants them to go back to school. School's got to open up. The only way school's going to open up is to get to a different phase. So he was forward thinking. He was upstream thinking and how he really wanted to solve this problem, not by what's happening right in front of him, but how he can make a difference as one of the contributing society members. And so we go down and sit down at the picnic table outside, and our server comes up, masked up, QR code menu, take a photo of that, and menu pops up on my smartphone. Thought that was great. It felt natural, felt safe, and quick. Hey, let's do this. So my wife and I just went through the menu, and she described what the dining experience was going to be like. Now, this is a very casual outdoor setting, and I noticed that there was a high top, like a bar top table, about 6 feet away from our seating table. And she stood by that, staying distance, and she commented that we were both wearing masks, and she appreciated that, but then went on to describe that you don't have to wear your mask while you're sitting at your table. But if you do get up to go use the restroom or get up to mingle around for any reason, please put on your mask. Very kind, courteous. We immediately commented that she was standing far away and how much we appreciated her helping us feel good about staying safe. And she said she immediately went to, I feel like the owners of this restaurant care about me as an employee. You're here dining for your dining experience tonight. I interact with everybody here, and I don't know where everybody has been. And so by doing it this way, which I then realized that bar top table that was 6 feet away was going to be her station. She was not going to get any closer than that. In fact, when she did bring our beverages and our food, she said, I'm going to bring them and put them on this table, and you get up and go get them and bring them back to your own table. Now, 6 months ago or a year ago, if somebody would have told me that that's what I needed to do in order to get my food, right, I would have went, are you crazy? What are you talking about here? And under this circumstance,
feels like just a variation on counter service, doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah. Like come up and get your own food. And instead it was very deliberate and intentional in how she felt confident that her employer cared enough about her and everybody else that's working there to social distance as a essential frontline worker in a restaurant. And I thought, I can learn from this, not just from how we can help other restaurant operators recognize that, but how do we do that internally with our own employees? Are we practicing the same measures as leaders, as managers here, of treating our employees that same way? Or are we tiptoeing into it going, I'm sorry, you got to wear a mask, but here's what we got to do. Instead of being very intentional, we might inadvertently be sending a mixed signal and a mixed message if we're not intentional.
Right.
And so thank you for introducing that word to this conversation, because that really helps me recognize why these things are important. There's technology that I know that our industry is going to need to embrace differently, and we want to be a part of that solution and help. But we're a food service distributor, and we have got a vital part of the supply chain in order to get the food to these restaurants and to our customers, and and to operators. But I think another part is the ideas that we have don't have to be born by me. The ideas can be shared by experiences that we all have with each other. And to me, that is the sense of community that the food service industry, the restaurant industry, has got over so many other industries, that we are so social in our interaction and our requirements, I guess, to exist, that it's meant to be a place where we all gather. And so as we are starting to venture out into taking chances of going out to eat, I think this is part of how we help operators get very deliberate and intentional about how they feel. And it really makes me energized to think about what's important. And I'm probably going to go off script a little bit here, but
there's no script. You do you.
For me, it feels like the personalization of our own personal interests need to come out. And it's okay to share how you feel about your business, how you feel about your employees, your coworkers, and how you feel about the places you choose to go spend your money.
Right.
And I want our organization to really express through the individual people that interact with customers and interact with the public, and our leadership team, how we interact with our own employees, because that personalization has to come out to be real. And I think, it's not just a matter of quoting corporate values or guiding principles.
It's not an inspirational poster, right?
It's not. It really comes down to, well, what's important? And I want to attract the best people to come to work here through that. How do you feel about who you're working for? How do you feel about the environment that you're working in? Because you and I talk about this a lot. This environment is not the same as it was. And it's not going to get back to the way it was immediately. It's going to take some time.
Or, with something like this completely shifts the context, that foundational ground that we stand on. So will anything ever really go back to where it was? There's that adage, you can't go home again. And I'd heard that so many times before it was contextualized for me, that when you are on a journey, the journey changes you. And so when you do get back to where you started, you are so different that you can never go home again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is an experience that we're all having. And as much as we want to get back to normalcy, I think we can do it, but it's not going to look anything like it did before, will it?
No. And I think you're spot on, because it's that normalcy, is that really like a place? Or is normalcy a feeling of safeness? Mm-hmm. Or, do I feel comfortable? Or am I living in fear? And I'd like to believe that I'm probably more of a realist. I'm not a pessimist, and I lean more towards optimism, but I like to understand what's real and what's happening. And so I don't have a crystal ball on what the future is going to look like. But from a perspective of a business leader, there has to be some understanding of what could be. And one of the things that has driven me to really be energetic about this business overall is the fact that the industry is all about family and interaction with friends and the social aspect of being with each other. And so if we could look to whatever that normal is how do we get to the point where we feel like we can trust one another? And that will drive what the new normal feels like, is that level of trust. So if from an operator standpoint, and believe me, I don't own a restaurant, but I see so many that recognize that it factor on how do I make you as a consumer come into my restaurant? How do I make you feel safe here? And that can be said, looking backwards as far as looking forwards. That's always been part of the deal. Is this an environment that I feel like I want to spend my time in, and that I want to interact with family or friends or wherever I might be going out with, or just dining on my own? And it's that trust factor that I'm going to be treated right. I'm going to feel as though, health safety wise, it's a high priority. And as I grab my mask,
I saw that.
And also, is the food something that I feel like really fits with the purpose of my need to fuel my body? And so without getting into all the details of that, I just believe that foundation comes down to, we just want to feel like we are in a safe place. And that safe place allows us to experience this dining in a memorable way that I won't forget. And I may forget what I paid for the meal, but I won't forget how it made me feel when I was interacting with the people that were working there and the other patrons and the person that I'm dining with. In this particular case, it was my wife. Mm-hmm. But we both, gushed to our friends as we got back about yodeling. And it wasn't just the food, it was the way that we experienced that unusual dining activity that we had during this COVID crisis. And,
right.
And in a location that I typically don't go visit very often in Leavenworth. And I'm just grateful that I had that opportunity. So I want to thank the people at Yodeland for that.
Terrific. I want to talk about them just a little bit more and then use that as a catapult into talking about leadership and your workforce as a community or the community in general. But
absolutely. So
I'm going to guess that when you selected Yodeland, that you probably went in there with a certain degree of caution, or perhaps you had a window of your mind open to skepticism. And step by step, you saw this intentionality play out. At what point did you and your wife just kind of feel like you could just settle into yourselves and let that go and just trust?
It was right at the point when our server explained to me what it is that was going to take place. Uh-huh. She kind of painted the picture for our dining experience and was not robotic about it. It was the way that she just made us relax.
Right.
That I didn't have any concern now. You can go ahead and take your mask off, and now you can have your dining experience. And this is what it's going to look like. Don't worry, nobody's going to come. She didn't say it this way, but don't worry, nobody's going to come around here and sneeze on you. And I think that part of it is I stopped looking around at everybody else, and I started just thinking, this is my experience now.
Right.
And then it gave me a chance to look beyond the other patrons that were there and at the scenery and the beautiful location that we were sitting in.
Well, and she felt safe. And
so because of her, because of the way that she was responding, I mirrored that, if I could put it that way.
Right. Being a restaurant consultant, most often whoever I'm collaborating with does almost everything really very well. And that puts them in a point of self-awareness that they're reaching out to get support or help or perspective outside of themselves. That's a sign of strength and courage. And often leadership and the flow of communication is so vitally important. So everything that you had talked about with Yodeland just reeked of leadership. And part of leadership is strategy and tactics, and something that I really liked about that story, by the way, my restaurant nerd brain, was that they used that table, they capitalized on the social distancing of table spacing to create a barrier with that, extended curbs or counter service, where they brought it to that sort of way station, that staging area. I think that's really smart. I'll be talking to people about that a lot.
Yeah, I think a big piece of plexiglass in between a server and their customers may not always feel as, even though it's probably very safe, it just doesn't look the same.
Well, you feel like you're in a fishbowl too that way, don't you?
Yeah. So I can't imagine, carrying around a big piece of plastic and trying to serve somebody, but it became that safe zone that was really, that I think that's the point where we went, okay, this is unique and I really like this. First, the QR code menu, and then now the explanation and the welcome, and then, they're really serving it this way. This is a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that those kind of ideas are probably not unique to that one location any more than a QR code menu pop up on your smartphone, or just using a single chalkboard for everybody looking at the same chalkboard for quick service, or come up to the counter and pick up your your food that way by having a number. I mean, all these different things are ideas and solutions to a problem. And I really believe that our industry is full of geniuses that like to problem solve.
Right.
And I believe that there's going to be these type of things that will be the new normal. And that normal being specifically, do I feel safe under this situation?
Right. And how's, whatever you're going to do has got to be appropriate for who you are and where you are and who you serve. We can see that there was leadership at play at Yodelin. And based on everything that you've shared, it's clear that it was designed to be appropriate for all of those factors and more that I just outlined. And I feel like I know you well enough to understand that you take your role as a leader to heart, and it's part of your identity, and you pursue the skills and the challenges of growth that comes with that role. Let's circle briefly back to a statement that you made earlier that you want to help the industry come back better than it was before. When you consider your role as a leader and this intentionality that we're talking about, this vision of values and how you're going to organize your team, your staff, your community, however you want to phrase it, holding all these related points in mind, can you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, so it kind of makes, so thank you for bringing that up. It makes me think about some of the steps that we have taken throughout all of this. And I can honestly say that this has probably been the most challenging time in my career of leading overall. We just believe that the idea of serving someone else includes serving our own employees. So if I'm not serving a customer directly, I will be serving somebody who does. And so I've got to think of it in those terms, that it's not just about me. It's about what I can do and how I can help, or how I can help somebody feel safe when they're working with me. And so that social distancing work may be very robotic and systematic, and we might be able to point to some guidelines that were laid out for us, but it really becomes the intention of do I really believe in this, and is this important? Because it isn't just about me, it's about the people I get to work with and their safety. So that was number one, and I think that decision on how we're going to go through ensuring that this place needs to be a safe place to work had to be first and foremost, and that wouldn't taken place if it didn't permeate in our principles as an organization and caring about people first. I believe that if we've got amazing team members here at Harbor Foodservice, the only way you can state that is if they feel like this is a great place to work. And how do you make this place a great place to work? Well, you treat people with respect, right, and you treat people with listening to how they feel and what they're at. And so a lot more listening than talking, unlike on this podcast. But there's a time for that.
I'm leading this podcast, so I think I think we're aligned on that.
A lot more listening than just talking. But I think it really comes down to, how do we treat each other? There's a point that I think I want to emphasize that I grasped onto from an author that I read in business books quite often, Patrick Lencioni, has made a statement here recently that in the future, the word personalization will be more important than professionalism. And that struck a chord with me because it speaks of being vulnerable, and it speaks of being real, and it speaks of opening up who we are, not just who we are at work, but who we are as individuals. And what's important to me in my personal life can't be this door that I shut when I leave the office and then I have a completely different, separate lifestyle, at my home. I am who I am, and I believe I'm the same person at work as I am at home with my family. And so I think those points will be more important for us to look at as leaders in the future than they were in the past. But it has to be intentional. And I think that's one of the things I learned from this aha moment of this, that word is important because it clearly identifies the direction that I'm going to go. And I want it to be seen that that's what's important. And so if I'm not expressing who I am and what I'm all about from a personal standpoint, then how authentic am I really going to be? And I believe that by having that first, that the customers that we work with in the industry and the other professionals that I interact with in different boards in the industry and even outside of our industry, they'll recognize that. And like-minded thinkers tend to congregate and be attracted to each other. And I want to attract that type of leader in the customers that we do business with. And so the only way to do that is to be genuine, to be authentic, and to be real.
Authenticity is a sign of strength. We're not raised into a culture that sees vulnerability as strength. It really actually is. And there was something that you said about, you mentioned that you have a lot of great people working here. And as you started talking, everything that you had said about leadership and intentionality, to me, creates a safe space to give permission for people to bring their greatness out at the same time. And, why wouldn't you want that? You can get a lot of great people who've got such a contrary work persona that it hinders that greatness. And I'm underscoring this not to pat you on the back, but hopefully to give listeners permission, or to reinforce my own permission, to recognize that being vulnerable is courageous and it is a sign of strength, but it also gives permission for other people to, let their freak flag fly, and you do you, and it's in that chemistry and that bombacity that really exciting things can happen.
Well, thank you. And I think that in order to get the best out of each other, you got to be willing to step forward and be that yourself. And so I just don't know any other way. And I really think that overall, it in the long run, not just at the industry or the business level that we're in, it's the entire industry is counts on that, because that is that's the attraction to why you would want to even leave your home when you're dining. Now it's 6 feet apart with a bar top, and the server is six feet away from me. Will that be forever? I don't know. But is it in front of us right now today? Yes. Can you still create a great dining experience by doing that? I found out you can. It's very personal on our interaction and our intention to be authentic with each other and to talk with each other about how we feel. We've got a lot of social issues happening in our communities right now today that are very challenging, with Black Lives Matter and the protests. There's too much politicizing of issues that should be more thought of as caring and how we treat each other. And this mask that I'm holding in my hand, and that us being more than 6 feet apart in this podcast, is not just about me. It's about you.
It's about us.
It's about us. Yeah. And how do we help each other get through this so that we can find that new normal in the future? So I'm looking forward to it. I'm optimistic of all of that, but I'm realistic about how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
And so that's where the intention comes from.
So you just brought up 3 points that I think come together. And one is, we talked earlier about how this disruption is also a window of opportunity. And I'd be curious to see how you feel about it, but I feel that the industry has been slow to change in the right way for a while now, for a lot of different reasons. It's not because it's a slow to change industry. It's because you're lucky to make a nickel on the dollar. And when the forces around you keep shifting and changing that affect that, you're in a constant state of adjustment, and it's so easy to get caught up in what's urgent that you don't have the time or the attention for what's important. And this has created an opportunity for that. But I think that radiates out socially. And, we see this with the protests, with the Black Lives Matter, with people fighting for equity and Me Too movement. I mean, there's so many different things that are kind of aligning right now that people are reacting to strongly. And it's an opportunity for the industry. It's an opportunity for society that the industry exists in to adjust and be better for the now. The third point that this comes together on is the greatest generation, the one that went through World War II. They weren't born great. They faced a disruption. They faced an adversarial experience that was World War II that disrupted the entire planet. And we haven't had something to do that with the exception of the slow burn of global warming that we don't seem to be reacting to either. But this pandemic there's parallels to me. And how are we going to come out of this? I had a conversation like this with Justin Erickson. He agreed. We ruminated on that, but I don't want to give you any insights. What do you think about that? I see some parallels and some differences between that global crisis of World War II and this global crisis of a pandemic. How do you think that's going to affect us?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good segue into a conversation that it reminds me of that I was having with my wife, and I'll give her 100% of the credit. And she used the word crevasse or crevice, and I think in our history, being a baby boomer, growing up in the 60s, I often have discussions with my mother and my siblings about, well, what was it like to grow up during that period of time when there's a lot of uncertainty and social unrest, and without going into the details of what my family has shared with it, the point is that it gave us all an opportunity to talk about it. And I think what the parallels that you're talking about and the word crevice, is that this has opened up that crevice. It has given us a chance to say it's okay to talk about these things that we believe or don't believe in. And it still comes down to, as we get a chance to express ourselves on what that means, the ultimate is being heard. And so I think our situation that we're in right now, that COVID-19 has provided an opportunity to put everybody on a level playing field, that we're all in the same situation, not just in our small community here or in the city of Seattle or in the state of Washington or in the United States. It's the whole globe, and we're all in the same place. And so this kind of puts us in a position of deciding, well, what do we want to do with this opportunity? And I really think that this is going to give us a chance to find those true leaders that are going to come out, and those true inventors that are going to come out, and those true problem solvers that are just going to feel empowered to be able to provide information. And it behooves us as leaders of any type of business or even in government to stop for a second and listen. Maybe stop for more than a second. Stop for a long period of time and listen. And then maybe some of these great ideas that have been around might be a little more open to accepting them than what we had before. Mm-hmm. And so I think in 5 years we'll look back on this period of time and go, wow, that was amazing. We got through all of that. And I don't look at it like this is a detriment. I look at it like this is an opportunity for us to really create something that is new. Amazing things will happen, and new ideas will take place of the old ones, and they will be stronger in their depth and width of how many people believe that those are the things we should be doing. So from the social issues that we're dealing with today and the challenges, I applaud anybody that not just talks about it, but also steps in and wants to do something about it. And I would say that there's room for improvement at any business, including ours. And I think what this has done has given us a chance to just openly talk about it and then start to put together a more comprehensive plan. There's an opportunity for all of our employees, or whatever generation they're at, to recognize that these are the things that are important to me, and I want to work for the place that believes in that.
It's almost like what we're experiencing now is World War II and civil rights had a weird baby, and it's today. And so we have something that is unifying us, and we have some deep-rooted issues that we need to come to Jesus about. And everyone has these really strong, passionate feelings about these things, and they're all interrelated. I wonder, you recognize that while there is some diversity here in this company, it's not reflective of the society and the cultures that we serve. I've worked in very non-diverse organizations, and I've worked with very diverse organizations. And the more diverse they are, there tends to be a little more orderly chaos, but it's a lot more dynamic to me. It's not quite as linear as the less diverse. So why do you want to do it? Do you want to do it because it's the right thing to do, or do you see that there's deeper benefit to it?
I think it's the deeper benefit. I don't think it's a straight line. I wish it would be as easy as that. I think it's more in tune with what you had mentioned earlier about what does our society look like today? And I think that being fair and being equal and giving people the strength to not be afraid to try something that's unique and opportunistic. And the food service industry attracts those individuals because it's an easy entry into this first job or second job. And I started off in a restaurant bussing tables and got promoted to a server, and then I got to be a pizza maker for a little while, and then I, not just doing dishes and pizza making anymore. All of a sudden now I'm an assistant manager, and then I'm a manager, and then now I'm opening up a new restaurant, and then I get to work at a food service distribution company, and I become a manager there. So it's a path to career opportunities in the food service industry. I want us to be able to be reflective of those risks that individuals can take, as well as look at it as there's a huge part of our industry that we need to be more intentional about how we attract people to stay in this industry. So I think that's more or less what I'm trying to say, is that it's our restaurant types are not specific. Mm-hmm. We have a wide variety of customer and restaurant segmentation. And the menu diversity is there, and the people that work in the restaurants, the people that dine in restaurants. I want us to have that same level of diverse interests, so that we attract the best candidates that are out there, and that will come to work here and help us grow and do more. So it's that straight line would be great, but it is not as easy as that. It just takes that one extra step to get there.
So what I'm hearing is you're striving to be more in alignment with the industry that you serve and the communities that we exist in.
It's about us really making this a safe place to work, and a place where a wider candidacy of individuals feel like, oh, the restaurant industry is greater than me just working starting as a busser in a pizza place.
There's a whole matrix of opportunity within this industry.
Unbelievable. Right? And we need to be, there's the word again, intentional about how do we express that, and how do we share that. And I think it's just the right method to go about running a business.
Yeah. So there's just one other topic that I want to make sure that we cover: locality, being local. We're talking about falling into alignment with the restaurants, the industry that we serve, and the communities that we serve them in. And you decided to take your precious vacation time to drive around Washington State. And so I'd like to explore that. And then we should probably end up having just another interview at another time to cover more things. But
I'd be happy to.
Let's talk about that. I know that this is something that you give a lot of time and attention to. It's foundational to this company, Harbor Foodservice and Harbor Foods Group, that this is a local. We are rooted here in the Northwest since the 1920s, and almost everyone who works with that I know of not only came from the industry, but they came mostly locally from the industry. So unpack that. I mean, I'm talking about this and your eyes light up and you're smiling and you're doing all sorts of things that people can't hear, but I can tell that you've got something to say about this.
Yeah, I do, and I think that's what is what's so great about this organization is the idea that sense of community is present. Well, what does community? What does local mean? And it isn't the beginning and the end. It is just the feeling that you get of when you are right in your own backyard. It makes a difference. And I think knowing people, knowing the individuals that are in your community, the restaurants that you go to on a regular basis, knowing the server's name, knowing the server knowing your name, the owner knowing and recognizing you, all of these things are feelings that create that part of that dining experience more than just the food being served. It's got to be a great dining experience overall. I think that has to be the same in a business. And I think what Harbor Foodservice offers is that local connection and that local feel. And it comes directly from being that personal, vulnerable, let me share with you what's important to me individually, and then this is the reason why our company feels like it does. All of those things are really hard to nail down because we all want to put them in a box and be able to express them. Or we want to say, well, here's all the local products that we offer. And so I don't know if it's as easy as that. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And so one of the areas that I'll use as an example is we have created this organization as a privately held local family-run business that's closing in on 100 years of existence. And the food service industry may not recognize the name Harbor Foodservice as easily as maybe the grocer and convenience store business might, because of that history goes back into that retail side. But as an organization, it has to be all a part of how do we gather the right products and working with local companies instead of trying to do everything on our own and be everything to everybody. We need to build more alliances and relationships with other companies that are very similar to us. And these are the values that come directly from Justin and his family. And it just so happens that I feel strongly about those same ideals as well. And so we have partnered with several local organizations. I'll just name them. They're very good supplier partners of ours. Peterson Cheese Company, Charlie's Produce, Northern Fish, La Mexicana Tortillas.
These are all homegrown.
These are all homegrown organizations that are just like us. You can't replace the importance of how it feels when you work with somebody or how it feels to do business with somebody that gets you. And that has to come from actions, the words, and the follow through, and the intention of doing the right thing. And I think that being local is all about that. It's that I know you, right? And I have a relationship with you. And that's how successful businesses capture sustainable opportunities.
Right.
It's not just the transaction that happened today and move on. It's I feel like I trust you because I know you. And all of those things have to be all intertwined with each other. And if we can encapsulate that into a sellable feature, then we're going to win the day. But I want to win the long term, and I want to do it for the right reasons. And I want our team to feel like that we're in this for the long haul, and that there's a sense of purpose out there for why the restaurant industry is so valuable to our communities.
Yeah, there's a sense of relevancy to local. You're out there talking to operators all the time.
Right.
What have your experiences been with those local operators? I mean, almost 90% of the industry are local, bootstrap people that their idea of growth is to get to 3 restaurants, but most have less than 50 employees, and they don't exist all over the nation. So what's your experience been with that?
I think the phrase that comes to mind is local like you. Mm-hmm. And I think that the reaction to this topic that you're talking about isn't as direct as, hey, well, what do you think about us being local? It doesn't ever, the conversations don't always start off like that, but it really comes down to information. And what is it that we all want is we want information, and we want information so that we can understand the situation and maybe put ourselves in a position of creating an idea that will really set us apart from anybody else. And I think that's creative thinking. And so if you're comfortable with that, then, you have an opportunity to really accelerate. But it starts with the information. And so you touched on something, Andy, that I think that really is what you do and what you do for Harbor and what your entire team does, and with Derek and with Nathan. And that is that let's share the information. It may not be our information. It may be industry information. It may be somebody else's idea, but let's share it. if we can find the right platform to be able to express that, whether that be through one-on-one relationships or some sort of social media or industry events, let's give that information away. Because if you've got the information, some people think that if you hold it, that it's going to be more valuable, and then you can sell it. And while that might be true in some situations, I believe in the situation that we're in today is give it away.
Yep.
Give it away in the context that is valuable to the recipient that you're giving it to. Give it away. And if you give that away, that will build that trust. And the reason why somebody makes a decision on where they partner with and who they work with, and why I want them to choose Harbor Foodservice, is because of that. Not just because of some other easy means of making a determination on how I'm going to do my transactional purchases. And that's a nice way of saying that, rather than just what's the price of something, how do we connect with each other on being of value to the overall organization and the overall purpose of us doing business together?
Right. The difference being price and value. You mentioned Derek. Derek is my chef counterpart. A lot of what we do is, as we teach, we learn, and we become carrier pigeons. I think one of my favorite quotes is, you can get more than you'll ever need by giving people what they need. You don't have to put it in an abacus and make it a transaction. You can just be giving and open to receiving.
Right.
Because that speaks to the true nature of humanity, I think, is we're very altruistic. Some of us get really focused on pessimism, but I don't think that's really in our true nature. And by embracing that, I think we become good neighbors and good stewards of the industry. I named this podcast Infinite Restaurants because there's always been restaurants in some form or another, and there always will be as long as there's people. But today, as the industry is and the people that are in it, we are stewards of that tradition, and we're contributing to whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, let's carry it on and let's do some things that will maybe help shape it to be better.
Yeah. I agree.
That's what I think ultimately, what I meant earlier about how do we come out of this thing better than where we were before. It's easy to get caught up into, well, oh my gosh, this is the worst we've seen it. And let's just hope to goodness that it is the worst we'll ever see it. But on the other side, that we have all these amazing ideas that will turn into something unbelievable. And I want to help shape that. And I want to be a part of that solution, not a part of the problem.
Is there anything else that you think you wish more operators understood about what you can and want to do for them, or what you can't do for them?
Well, yeah. So there's a lot, probably not enough time to be able to express everything, but I think that the basis is trust, is we're looking out for everybody's best interest, not just our own. Mm-hmm. And I think that has to start from that word trust. The communication of information and recognizing that there are others that are looking out for your best interests. We've got your back type of situation. I think that I just would say, open up to those ideas, open up to your vulnerabilities and trust the people that are working with you, that are working on your best interest. I think those are just the core things that are important going forward. So, and I promise on the other side to be very vulnerable and be very open and transparent and honest and willing to share what's happening in our part of the world as well. So I think once that happens, the bond can get stronger and that relationship can get more rooted.
Yeah. All right. Randy, is there anything else you'd like to add to this conversation?
Andy, I just appreciate the work that you're doing to put something like this together. It's really difficult to be able to express what's important in business today. And you'd think it'd be easier with all the methods of getting the word out. This is an in-depth way of talking through what's happening in our industry, what's happening to our business, and what's important to us. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you putting something like this together to help us really express it to multiple audiences. So
thanks.
Really appreciate it.
I hope that it is valuable. I hope that our intentionality lands on its mark. Randy Irvine, president of Harbor Foodservice, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we didn't cover nearly everything that could be covered. I guess we're just going to have to stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you, Andy. Let's do this again.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So long.